There is a story about the three great Asian spiritual leaders Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Buddha. All were meant to have tasted vinegar. Confucius found it sour, much like he found the world to be full of degenerate people. Buddha found it bitter, much like he found the world full of suffering. But Lao Tzu found the world sweet because he was able to see the natural harmony and balance that guides our world. Today, we'll be explaining Lao Tzu's philosophy and vision of the world, ideology that is so desperately needed in a world full of suffering, stress, worries, and hurries. The name that was given to this ideology is Taoism, and in this speech we will distinguish its main characteristics as well as the importance and the impact that it has in people's lifestyles and in the world in general. In fact, Sabiek 2020 states that the profundity of the Tao Te Ching, which is like the Taoist Bible, has left its marks on humanity to this day. To accomplish our purpose, we will address the main ideas of the Taoist ideology and how it relates to the human construct of suffering. We will also present a brief timeline of the history of Taoism and how people practice it nowadays. To begin with, I want you to close your eyes. No, but seriously, close your eyes. Now, I want you to truly feel and experience this present moment. Maybe you are finishing your projects or you are thinking about the upcoming exam. Maybe you are worrying about your personal circumstances or feeling stressed about the future. Maybe you are holding or regretting something of your past. Well, now I want you to forget about all of that. I want you to let go of your worries, your complex thoughts, and simply experience this moment. Just for a second, empty your mind from everything. Let your mind stay still and follow the sound of my voice. Focus on your breathing. Pay attention to the sounds around you. Now open your eyes. Were you able to do this exercise and truly experience this present moment? If you were, please raise your thumb. If you weren't able to do this exercise, well, maybe that is because you learned to be that way from this modern and Western culture. But if you were able to let your mind stay still, even if it was just for a second, well, then you experience what Taoism stands for. According to Personal Tao 2020, Taoism is more than just a philosophy or a religion. Taoism should be understood as being a system of belief, attitudes, and practices set towards the service and living to a person's nature. Taoism focuses in spiritual growth and the following of a path or a way, which is called the Tao. But what is the Tao? Well, that is a question that we cannot really answer because it goes beyond our comprehension. But do you remember the story I told at the beginning? Well, the Tao will be that force that balances the world and gives the world harmony. The goal is to live in agreement with it, even if we're not able to describe it. The goal is to achieve stillness of mind. And it doesn't mean that we need to stay with our eyes closed and stay quiet all the time, like we just did. It means that we need to apply the concept of Wu Wei, which can be translated as non-action, as the effortless action of the action of non-action. I know that this is difficult to understand, so it can also be described as going with the flow or being in the zone. This concept goes against the Western and modern idea of working harder to get results or forcing things. Taoism compares life to a river. A river already has its course or several courses, and once we find ourselves in that river, we can go against the course or we can go with the flow. We can apply the concept of Wu Wei in our lives. One of the main ideas of Taoism is the famous concept of the yin and the yang. Natural Geographic 2020 states, "These ideas represent magic pairs such as light and dark, hot and cold, action and inaction, which work together toward a universal whole." Yin and Yang shows that everything in the universe is connected and that nothing makes sense by itself.
Hello everyone. Next, we will talk about the Taoist idea of suffering. Taoists believe that we all have a place in the world, and the natural state of things is exactly as things are and how they naturally develop. Therefore, any separation from this natural state will cause us to begin suffering. This separation occurs because people develop attachments, preferences, wants, desires. And when this occurs, we start disconnecting ourselves, distracting ourselves from the world as it is, and we start imagining what things could or should be. This is important because this generates anxiety and uncertainty about the future instead of just accepting it as how it is. When it comes to dealing with suffering, Taoists just look for understanding the world so we can fit better in it. Pathos.com and Medium.com gives us an explanation about how exactly do Taoists come to these conclusions. Specifically, this Taoism is the original one, presented in the Tao Te Ching, the first book of the Taoist beliefs, which leads us next and third to the history of Taoism. Taoism is developed in during something named the Axial Age. In his book, A History of the World, Andrew Marr tells us that the Axial Age was between 500 and 300 before the Common Era. The Axial Age is represented by a state of constant disorder or war, which connects with the past idea of suffering. Things were not as they should be. We were in a constant status of self-created conflict, not naturally developing conflict, not part of the world, but part of preferences, states, and personal interests. The Axial Age coincides with the Warring States period in China, which is between 475 and 221 before the Common Era, in which Taoism is either written by Lao Tzu, which sometimes is believed to be a mythological figure, or compiled through common folk wisdom. Now, after the Warring States period comes a small amount of time in which the Taoism of Celestial Masters is developed. This type of Taoism is developed by Yangtze. He is meditating and has a revelation that implies the use of morality and myths in the Taoism. Such is why this sect is formed, and it is named the Taoism of the Celestial Masters. This includes now otherworldly figures instead of just the present moment. So it is a major deviation from the original idea of Taoism. This sect is very important, and as we see on totallyhistory.com, that the Yellow Turban Rebellion occurs during the Han Dynasty, which is about the Warring States period to after the Yellow Turban Rebellion. And Yellow Turban Rebellion occurs in 184 to 205 of the Common Era. Zhang Jue starts a rebellion. His rebellion is based on the idea that the Han Dynasty is not respecting the natural order of things. It is corrupt, and it is depriving people from the land, from the resources, what belongs to no one, and the part that we are part of. Therefore, based on this concept of what is sacred and of what he needs and what the people need, he starts a rebellion to bring this back. It is called the Yellow Turban Rebellion because yellow is associated with rice being ready and with fertile land. Therefore, they said that the sky will turn yellow when the Han Dynasty would fall. The rebellion was successful, and the Taoism of Celestial Masters as a sect became one of the major influences in the world of Taoism. We do not see such a major event in Taoism until 1919, which is over a millennia away. This is because of the prohibition of religious beliefs in China. So it is not so much as a change in the nature of Taoism, it is a change in the number of believers because the state prohibited it. This is due to Mao Zedong's rebellion in China, imposition of communism, and destruction of the classical Chinese beliefs and cultural system. We do not see a restoration until 1982. Info Taoism gives us these dates and gives us the graph we have in History of Taoism, well, the timeline. The dates are not perfectly concise since there is little certainty as exactly when, we only have averages, but the point of the history of Taoism are these three pivotal spots.
In addition to providing an understanding of the basis on which Taoism was found, its practice marks a pivotal moment of the Chinese civilization, and, according to the authors of Taoism and the Arts of China, published in 2000, Taoism is of primary importance in Chinese social and political history, and that an understanding of Taoism in traditional China will enable us better to comprehend modern China. Considering the previous statement, it can be acknowledged that the practice of Taoism is essential in understanding the Chinese culture. However, the way that it is practiced is diverse because, surprisingly, Taoism and the Arts of China explains that there are two modes of practice. Taoism that serves the spiritual needs of the community, and Taoism that serves the spiritual needs of the individual. On the same matter of practice, the author of Taoism, An Essential Guide, Wang, published in 1997, reveals that within Taoism there are different kinds of meditation. Different sects practice different styles of meditation, and within the same sect, the form of meditation changes as one progresses in practice. There are 12 kinds of Taoist meditations. According to Wang, one of these methods is a method of internal observation, where one stops the recognition of thoughts, emotions, and sensations, and so has a clear mind, free of thoughts, free of problems. The mind is used to defeat the mind. Another example of meditation, according to Wang, would be the method of focusing on the center, in which one seeks to gradually lose attention to the outside world. When the mind ceases to perceive sounds and outside events, then, with the focus of one sole thing, does one achieve balance, or the Tao. So, on this claim, it can be understood that, like its ideals, the practice of Taoism is ever-changing and is dependent on the person that practices it and the life they are living through. After researching the topic, some common practices of a Taoist involved setting guidelines to oneself. Examples of these were aiding with care those close to you, being true to yourself, being honest on how you want to be viewed by others, being decisive, and being forgiving. In conclusion, how many topics of Taoism did we talk about? We have reviewed 4. Firstly, the concept of Taoism. We saw the analogy of the 3 spiritual leaders drinking wine, and Lao Tzu's philosophy of Taoism. The idea of suffering was the second one, in which we viewed the premises of Taoism and the understanding of the method to minimize suffering. The third one we saw was the story of Taoism, the context in which it was born, and its development through history. Lastly, we saw the practice of Taoism, its importance, types of practices, and some forms of meditation. With this gained knowledge, you will be able to identify and differentiate Taoism from other ideologies and practices. It is important to recognize the impact a point of view can have on an individual, their visualization of reality, the way they react to a certain emotion, sensation, or thought, and how they choose to face them.